Welcome to Mindful Leadership, Transforming Lives, with your host, Singh. This is where leadership meets purpose, presence, and passion. In today's fast paced, high pressure world, we face a leadership crisis. Too often, teams are led by managers who lack empathy, clarity, and vision, leaving individuals uninspired, disconnected, and undervalued. But it doesn't have to be this way. Great leadership isn't born, it's built. The end game: empower your leadership, inspire the world. Every week, join me, your host Singh, as we tackle the gaps in leadership and life coaching head on, learning how mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and compassion can redefine success. This isn't just another podcast, it's a mission to fill the void left by ineffective leadership. And it's not just about leadership in business. Life coaching for leaders and new executives is at heart of this journey. Ready to rise above the noise and lead with clarity, purpose, and impact? Join a global movement dedicated to reshaping the future of leadership one mindful moment at a time. Let's begin.
Welcome back. I'm your host Singh, and you're listening to another episode of Mindful Leadership Transforming Lives on the Transformation Network. Over the last few episodes, we have done some serious work. We have tackled emotional awareness, tried to shut off autopilot to harness the presence power, mastered the art of leading by listening, and panic proofed our minds so we can stay cool under pressure. Basically, we have been building up into strategic thinking, crisis crushing superheroes of your own lives. Today, we are talking about what happens when life throws you not one curveball, but a whole curveball machine. You know, the kind where it feels like every pitch is labeled unexpected, the kind where perfectly planned day turns into an episode of Survivor Inbox Edition. And if you're thinking, who's saying that's dramatic, let me remind you of this week's headlines. We have got billion-dollar companies making last minute pivots because of AI competition. Sports teams rewriting playbooks mid season. And yes, fans still pivoting their entire budgets for concert tickets. Heck, even Elon Musk seems to be pivoting every other Tuesday. So, yeah, shift happens and it's happening everywhere. But here's the thing: the people who thrive when chaos hits aren't the ones panicking in the corner saying, "Why me?" They are the ones who know how to pivot with clarity, with confidence. And lucky for you, that's exactly what we are diving into today. So, whether it is a surprise deadline, a major life change, or even your toddler sneaking in your Zoom call undressed or dressed as a Spider Man, true story, by the way, this episode is all about arming you with a step by step process to turn chaos into opportunity. By the end of this episode, you will be able to handle any curveball with clarity, confidence, and maybe even a bit of swag. Because, yes, shift happens, but so does growth. So let's begin. All right, let's get into the pivot process. This is the secret sauce, the 5 steps that will keep you calm, clear, and confident when life decides to throw you a plot twist. Think of it as your personal GPS for navigating chaos, except it won't say recalculating in the passive aggressive tone. Here's the thing about pivoting: it not just for basketball players, startups, or TikTok trends. We are all pivoting constantly. Whether it's shifting deadlines at work, adjusting to unexpected changes at home, or figuring out how to explain your parents the first time how Netflix works. Seriously, we have to break it down step by step with some real examples so you can see how this works in action. So step 1 is pause. When the unexpected hits, the first thing you do is stop and breathe. This is not the time to send a flurry all caps email that starts with urgent, please read, or to start a rage texting your team. Think of this like hitting the brakes on a runaway car. You have got to regain control because you can steer even if you cannot apply the same brakes. Imagine you are an event planner, and this is a real story. And the morning of the big event, you find out the venue double booked your space. Yeah, you have got a wedding reception setting up in what's supposed to be your conference room. Now, the old you might panic and start screaming about breach of contract. But the pivot process version of you pause. You take a moment to breathe, assess, and not throw a chair at the wedding cake. See, when you pause, you give your brain the chance to stop spiraling. You are creating space for clarity. This pause is not long, just long enough to stop the emotional flood and start thinking strategically. Now that you have paused, it's a step two, identify what is actually causing this shift. Is it external, like a competitor making a sudden move? Internal, like a breakdown in communication? Or maybe just Mercury in retrograde, because let's be honest, Mercury is out here ruining lives at least last times a year. A startup I worked with was gearing up to launch their app. Everything was set, marketing campaigns, press release, the works. But then, 3 days before launch, a competitor dropped a similar product with a flashier design. Cue, panic. But instead of freaking out, we identified the root cause. The competitor wasn't actually better, they just has snazzier marketing angle. Boom, we pivoted our messaging to focus on apps functionality, which was miles ahead of the competition. The result, a launch that crushed expectations. See, identifying the root cause isn't just about solving immediate issue, it's about understanding what's beneath the surface so you can respond intelligently, not emotionally. And that's where step three, validate. Now, this is where you zoom out and ask, does this shift still fit into the bigger picture? And if it does not, how do you adjust? Here is a relatable example. Ponder you're working on a big project at work, and suddenly your boss comes in and says, actually, we need to change the focus. Classic move, right? Now, instead of diving into new direction blindly or resisting the change, you validate. You ask yourself, does this new direction align with your goal? Does this align with my values? Now, this step is crucial because it stops you from chasing shiny objects and it stops you from reactive decisions that don't serve the end game. This is how you make your pivot in a purposeful and not just a frantic spin in circles. Think of it recalibrating your GPS. You are still heading to the destination, you are just finding a better route. And then, step four, you organize. This is where you get tactical. You have paused, identified the root cause, and validated your direction. Now it's time to lay out the plan. Think of this like building IKEA furniture. You have got a bunch of pieces scattered everywhere. But instead of panicking about the tiny Allen wrench, you take step by step by step. So if you go back to the event planner example I just gave, after pausing and identifying the problem, which is double booked venue, they validated their goal, hosting a successful conference. Now, organizing looks like finding an alternative room, rearranging their schedule, and communicating with everyone involved. Now, this step is also where you can get your team or support system involved. Pivoting is not a solo sport, people. The more brains you have working on the solution, the better. And then finally, we take the action. This is where magic happens. Even the smallest intentional step can create momentum and get you moving forward. Here is something relatable for you. You have decided to start a fitness routine. You pause to assess your schedule, identify that mornings are the best time, validated that this aligns with your health goals, and organize your plans, maybe laying it out your gym clothes the night before. Now, the action. Just getting to the gym, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to run a marathon, you just have to show up. The same goes for pivoting. Action beats perfection every time. You might not have the perfect plan, but the act of moving forward builds clarity, confidence, and momentum. This pivot process, pause, identify, validate, organize, and take action, is core to one of my keynotes that I give. It's also core of one of the books that I'm going to be publishing. Now, I want you to think about a recent time when your plans didn't go as expected. Maybe project at work fell apart, or maybe your kids decided to turn the living room into an art studio. How could you have used this process to adapt? The truth about life throws curveballs at all of us. But people who thrive aren't the one who avoid change. They are the ones who embrace change. So when shift happens, remember, you got the tools to pivot like a pro. And if you've got a story to tell about a time that you nailed a pivot or a time it all went hilariously wrong, I want to hear it. Share your story using hashtag pivot like a pro, and let's keep the conversation going. Because if there's one thing I have learned is this: shift happens, but so does growth. So let's grow together. All right. Let's dive into first. I want to tell you a story, a real world example of pivot process in action, and then stick around because we are going to practice it together. Think of this as your pivot process boot camp: past inspiration, past stimulation, and a whole of lot laughs, right? So ponder this. A small but scrappy startup is gearing up to launch their flagship product. The team is buzzing. Marketing campaigns are live. Press releases are ready. And the CEO is already practicing there. We are changing the world speech for launch party. Everything is set. But then 3 days before launch, I still get goosebumps as if I was there in that day back again. 3 days before launch, boom, a competitor drops a nearly identical product. And I'm not exaggerating. Even CEO's mom wouldn't call and say, honey, did they steal your app? Right? Hence the chaos. Now, most teams would panic, Googling what to do when your competitor steals your thunder, or binge eating vending machine snacks, but not this team. No, they had the pivot process in their back pocket, right? Let me break it down how they used it to turn disaster into opportunity. First, the first thing that they do was they paused. Now, I know that's hard when your world feels like it's on fire. But instead of rushing into a knee jerk reaction, like, I don't know, scrapping the lunch or trying to one up the competitor, they took a moment to breathe. Maybe they even screamed into a pillow, who knows? Pausing gave them clarity to avoid any rash decisions. Think of it like driving in a snowstorm. You don't slam the gas and hope for the best. You pause, you assess the road, figure out the safest way forward. And trust me, Panicking never helps. There is a reason no one says haste makes brilliance, right? It never. Now, next, they moved into the phase of identifying, asking themselves what actually is going on here. Turns out, competitor had a bigger marketing budget and a flashier product demo. When it came to functionality, well, it was like comparing a shiny sports car with no engine to a reliable SUV. The product built was mm, not flash. This step is all about digging deep, figuring out why your toddler is melting down over the blue cup instead of red one. It's not about the cup, it's about the control. Same with market pivots. The root cause is rarely what you see on the surface. Then came the validate, and the team asked, does this competitor's launch change our bigger goals? And the answer was no. The goal was never to be the flashiest, it was to solve a real pain point of their customers, and the vision was still intact. See, this step separates a good pivot from reactive ones. It's like being at a buffet and seeing someone load up on crab legs. Sure, it looks fancy, but if you hate seafood, why would you do the same? Stick with what works for you. And then they got into organizing. This is where they laid out a tactical plan, shifted their messaging to focus on what made their product unique, the user experience. They didn't try to flash out competition, they leaned into their strengths, right? Like IKEA furniture, they didn't throw out bookshelf just because instructions were in Swedish. They reorganized the pieces so it worked for their customers. And here is the secret, they did not do it alone. They rallied their team, the PR experts, even loyal beta testers. Because pivoting is a team sport, whether it's personal life or business. No one wins a baseball game. No one wins a basketball game by dribbling solo for 48 minutes. Well, unless you're Michael Jordan. But for the rest of us, we need a team. Finally, it took action. They launched with their updated strategy, reached out to media outlets, and doubled down on their strengths. The result, a massive success. Not in spite of competitor, but because of the pivot. Customers loved the product, the media highlighted their unique approach, and the team walked away with a win. The big takeaway here, though, pivoting isn't about starting over. It is about adapting with purpose, not reaching out of fear. It's about staying aligned with your vision, even when shifts happens. All right, now it's your turn. Let's put pivot process into action. Think of this as a shift happens stress test. No, actual stress. Just a little mental workout, right? And here's a scenario. You are leading a major client project. Everything is running smoothly. You're feeling like a Beyonce of project managers, flawless, in control, maybe even humming run the world, girls, under your breath. But then the client calls, and you know trouble's coming because they start with, we love your work, but they drop the bomb. We need to change the scope. Suddenly, the timeline gone, budget slashed, deliverables, well, floating in air like balloons at a kid's birthday party. What do you do? So let's break it down. First, pause. Take a deep breath. Seriously, do it with me. Inhale, exhale, inhale, and exhale. Okay, now assess what's actually changed. Is this a total overhaul, or are they just tweaking a few details? See, pausing lets you respond thoughtfully instead of reacting emotionally. It's like being stuck in traffic when GPS says, add 30 minutes to your trip. Sure, you could stream at the dashboard, but is that helping? No. Pause, breathe, and figure out your next move. Bonus point, if you turn off some Lizo while you are at it's about the damn time, I know. Next, identify. What is the root cause of the shift? Is it budget cuts, a new business priority, or did someone higher up read a LinkedIn post about thinking outside the box, right? And then validate. Does this new direction align with project's bigger goals? And then we organize, tidy up the chaos, create a clearer plan, over communicate with your team to make sure everyone's on the same page. Try to get everything that can be reused to minimize the redo of the work. And finally, take action. Put the plan into motion, even if it's not perfect. Progress beats perfection every time. So there you have the pivot process in action. Now, pause, identify, validate, organize, and take action. Now, think about a time when life threw you a curveball. Was it a work project? Was it a family plan gone wrong? A weekend road trip that turned into a GPS nightmare? How could you have used pivot process to find clarity and move forward? And here's a challenge this week when shift happens, and it will, test out the pivot process. Start small, but work on it. Share your story with me using pivot like a pro, hashtag pivot like a pro. Remember, pivoting isn't a setback, it's a step up for your next breakthrough. Shift happens, but you have got this. So let's recap the episodes that we have had so far in mindful leadership journey. We started the journey with mindful compass. The first few episodes we discuss about presence power. Mindful practice is all about being present. The only two things that you have to remember about being present and starting the mindful journey in the moment. First, you have your breath. The only thing on this planet that scientifically differs between a dead and an awake human, a dead and an alive human, is the breath. And we take that breath for granted. So, being able to breathe and being able to focus on your own breath is the immediate intervention to your own autopilot in the brain, which shuts down or at least creates intervention for your fight and flight mode, amygdala, and tries to give control to the logical mind, which is the prefrontal cortex. So, like I said, there is only two things that is needed to be present in the moment. First is breath. The second, become the observer. Instead of judging, instead of creating your own ideation further on the ideas that you have in the brain, stop. When you take that breath, just become an observer. That's all you have to do. That's where it starts, right? The moment you take that pause, If you remember the master leadership compass, mindful leadership compass, the moment you take that pause, you start getting clarity and you start thinking logically because your prefrontal cortex gets engaged, and that gives you emotional agility. Now you can stop reacting because you are logically thinking. Now, once you can think logically, you can now have cognitive clarity to make decisions. And the moment you have cognitive cognitive clarity to make the decision, that's where you take intentional action. So the first thing this is the fourth section that we're going through, is taking that intentional step, right? So mindful leadership compass, presence power. How can you get in the present and bring that power to yourself? That leads to uh, emotional agility, being able to control your emotions and become responsive rather than reactive. Then your cognitive clarity, being able to clear the noise and look at the actual problem. And once you have that, take action, intentional action. The mindful leadership compass was enough for just being in the moment. But then we all know the life is not about the moment. It gets hijacked by our inboxes and our calendars. That's where this powerful tool of pivot process comes in. It takes 12 seconds to pause, to give enough time to intervene and give the control of your brain back to your prefrontal cortex, which then allows you to identify the true cause, the true problem, validate how and what can be done about that situation, organize with a new plan, and take action so you keep moving. No matter how small the step, you keep moving. All right, folks, let's land this plan. I know I'm not talking about the emergency kind where the oxygen mask drops. I'm talking about landing with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Here's the thing, shift happens, it's part of life, it's part of growth. But the difference between those who thrive and those who spiral lies between how they respond. So, are you the person who panics and starts Googling how to fix my life in 10 minutes? Or are you the person who pauses, pivots, and turns chaos into a win? Pause, identify, validate, organize, and take action. It's not just a framework, it's a mindset. And the best part, it works everywhere, in your career, in your relationships, and even your Saturday morning target runs when you realize they're out of your favorite coffee creamer. I want to hear your pivot stories. Share them with me using hashtag pivot like a pro or shoot me a message. I read every single one of them because your growth inspires mine. You are listening to Mindful Leader transforming lives on the Transformation Network. This wraps up our four-part series on clarity, pressure, and strategic thinking. But here's the kicker, the end of this series is just the beginning of your next level. You know how the tools, mindset, and the pivot process, all you have to do is use them. So when shift happens, and trust me, it will, you'll be ready. Stay clear, stay confident, and keep pivoting like a pro. I will see you in the next series. Until then, go crush your friends.
Thank you for watching Mindful Leadership Transforming Lives. With me, your host, Singh. We are honored to have you join us on this journey to explore the transformative power of mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and authentic leadership. Tune in every week on transformationtalkradio.com at noon Pacific on Tuesdays, where we will continue to explore how mindful leadership can create a ripple effect of positive changes in your life and lives of those you influence. This show is dedicated to helping you lead with purpose, presence, and passion. Whether you're navigating the complexities of business, building strong connection with your team, or striving to make a meaningful impact in the world around you. To learn more about the show, access additional resources, or dive deeper, visit singhpowerupcoach.com. Remember, leadership isn't just about what you do, it's about who you are. Let's continue to transform lives together, one mindful moment at a time. See you next week.